sometimes he would have stopped to explain creation for us. I've always been just super curious about how you separate lightness from dark, and how you separate water from the air, and all like that. And I just have to trust it was just God's infinitely understandable power that did that. But it would have been nice to have him come back a few chapters later and say, this is how I did that. Mm-hmm. Okay, I didn't mean to sidetrack us there. Sorry. I got us off track. Others take us as far off the rails as I thought. That's good. Others? Main idea of Habakkuk. How would you summarize this in a sentence or two?
In the book of your life, it's not going to be the ongoing thing forever. It's maybe just one chapter.
Good. I've given this some thought myself, and for me, I kind of see two threads in Habakkuk, two stories, in essence, within the whole story. And the first is really kind of encapsulated there in chapter 2, the latter half of verse 4b, of verse 4, where it says, but the righteous will live by his faith. The idea of Habakkuk's faith journey through the story, with teaching given by God along the way to his questions and all like that is I think a powerful story within Habakkuk, something that I can refer back to for my own guidance and growth. And so God, gave Habakkuk the vision of what was to happen, not only to Judah, but also to his instrument for that judgment, the Babylonians, and how his justice would win out. And so now we can live in faith for that same vision when we think about his further enactment of justice and his perfect example of justice through Christ. And so even though things are disturbing around us and we still have troubles and trials, we still see injustice, we still see oppression, if we cling to that righteous relationship with God, we can have faith that he will care for us. And we know that his ultimate vision, his ultimate reckoning with evil in the world, and the bringing about of the recreation of his perfect world will ultimately come. So that to me is kind of the first story.
The life of faith is a soul that rejoices in God's blessings, that even when things are going terribly wrong and look bleak and the barns are empty, there's no fruit on the trees, that we can still rejoice that God blesses us. And it's also the picture of a heart that loves the giver of those blessings, that we love God when he blesses us and when he gives us things, and we focus on him rather than what it is that he's giving us, that we can see the ultimate giver of those good gifts. And we know that even a life that's rich in blessings, we know that there's going to be times that we're living in the valleys and that there's going to be low points, but we know that he's always there. And even if he appears to be silent and he's not answering us, that we know he's always there. And that makes me think of the part of God in Jesus, the Good Shepherd, that he's always looking after his flock, that he will leave the 99 to go look for the one that's missing. That's very comforting to me, that thinking that God knows he's always looking around, and he knows who's missing, and he'll go after you, and he'll pursue you. He wants you to come back. It hurts him when one of us walks away from him, and he will run after you, or he'll wait patiently for you to come back, because he loves you that much. He knows exactly where all of us are at any given time. And that should give us great comfort. The verse, "Be still and know that I am God," is very powerful. That's very powerful. Just be still. We're always asking and questioning and everything. And he's just like, be still. Just be still and know that I'm right here and that I'll never leave you. And we also see a depiction of his sovereignty and his power. He's in control of everything, including the ungodly world powers. He's still in control of that. And he will uphold justice, even when especially when it's not the way we would fix something. He knows, he can see the whole big picture, and he knows the best way to solve a situation. It's his timing that counts, not ours. And like I said before, he may seem silent, but he's always listening. He's always answering our prayers. He's always hearing what's on our hearts. So now we've got some questions for all of you. So the first question is, do you think God sometimes uses anybody and everybody to fulfill his purpose? Why does he sometimes use a very unlikely person to fulfill his purpose? Why do you think he does that? Or do you think he does that, use unlikely people?
Just points back to, I forget who gave this as the main idea, but the idea that God's in control. Mm-hmm. And so, it's his plan, it's his power, it's his working. And so I think what makes people seem as an unlikely choice to be used in that way is simply our inability to see his plan, mm-hmm. and understand the immense working of his plan somehow.
Okay. So let's look at some of Habakkuk's emotions. He starts out these very urgent cries to God for help. He's desperate. He's searching for answers. And he questions God's apparent tolerance of evil by using the Babylonians, like what we were just talking about. He also uses, he's in the midst of confusion and desperation and fear of what's going to happen. He's anxious, but then it turns and he becomes calm and he accepts what's going to happen, and he starts rejoicing in God, and he has a new understanding of God's power and love, and he becomes bold. So in all those emotions that I just talked about, what emotions do you relate to during this time, during this pandemic, during this time of division in our country? Have you gone through ups and downs of emotions? What have you been feeling?
Some of you may have read things from Chuck Swindoll in times past, but I got a little chart that he prepared for Habakkuk here. And I'm not going to go through the whole chart, but something really that made sense to me was the direction in which Habakkuk was looking. If we follow that through the 3 chapters, we see him start off looking around at mainly the ills of Judah and the sins that he saw there, and he was worrying and confused, and troubled. It was a stressful time, and so you can just picture him just crying out, not praying quietly, but really bearing his soul to God in an emotional way. And then we progress a little further into chapter 2, and we see him looking up. He's changed his focus from looking around at the trouble that he's in to looking up and listening to God. And then as we move to chapter 3, after he's heard from God, he's looking ahead. He's looking to the future, not to the present and the ills. And he has that great statement of faith that, yet I will rejoice in the Lord my God. And he's believing. So he goes from confusion to belief. He goes from worry to rejoicing. And he goes from looking around to looking up and forward. I just thought that was such a good kind of summary from Habakkuk's viewpoint on that. Let me pose maybe another question for your responses as well. Katie talked about rejoicing in God, the giver, versus rejoicing in the gifts, which I think is a really important thing. I have prayed countless times thanking God for his blessings, but many fewer times have I thanked him for being God, for being my God. And so this idea of rejoicing in God himself rather than on his blessings brings me to this question. How do we learn to live trusting in God and not so much trusting that he'll be showering blessings on us? Success and happiness and whatever it might be. How do we change that to really having faith in God, our God? Discussion question.
So in all of this study of Habakkuk, what have you learned about questioning God? Have you always been comfortable with questioning God, or is this a new concept to you? How do you feel about it? I think I must have been brought up to think that you don't question God, that he is sovereign, and whatever he says, you just have to yield to that. And I remember a time several years back, Don and I had a meeting with Don McLaughlin, and it was during the time when both of my parents were dying at the same time. And I was just very upset that morning. And I was just, telling Don, I just don't understand why this is going on and stuff. And McLaughlin, he just leaned back in his chair and said, it's okay to question God, don't you? And I don't think I ever thought that that was legal, that we could do that, So how do you all feel about questioning God? Are you comfortable with it? Is this a new concept to you? What do you feel about it?
I know Adam needs to impart some knowledge right before we leave, but for our part, speaking for Katie and myself, thank you all for helping us learn the many lessons here from this short book. And it's been wonderful for us. I hope it's been good for you as well. Adam?
Yes, thank you.